looks like a solid wall of veranda posts from this angle, yeah? Well, on the corner of that one there was also a tower, and then the next one along. So they were the pointy bits. Here am I, I'm on the corner, I'm the dominant building, I'm the hotel, come and get a drink, you know, this is where you can stay. Okay. But one of the things about also that, while I say banks, hotels and retail and commercial stuff in High Street, upper levels are quite often accommodation. So here, this is a bank and offices building, but upstairs the accommodation for the manager of whatever premises that was. And the same on that corner, upstairs is the, it's actually at the back, down the street is the manager's quarters. And hotels have all accommodation on the upper levels, and they have the public rooms on the ground floors. What that means is that ground floors are reacting to the street and the public and the passing trade, but the bedrooms and people at night actually occupy the upper floors. And when you have that mix of uses, and both residential as well as commercial, that means there's somebody around at night. The place doesn't shut down at night. There are people living there and the lights are on, you know, in the rooms quite often. And that actually gives it a homely towny feel instead of a city that's shut down for the night. Now that's been lost a bit when Notre Dame takes over the hotels. They don't have any accommodation, and so there's nobody here at night. The place kind of shuts down. So that's a shame, but it's always, you can always bring that back. Okay, now we better watch our time so that we can meet Ilana. Okay, let's go to the corner now. These two buildings have did have accommodation on the upper levels, and you get to the accommodation here through the side door, but also down the alleyway, and the alleyway connects to the back gardens. So you've got a little bit of an alley in the street. There are not many of those in High Street, there are more of them in the side streets, but see your garden at the end, the greenery, roses, gateways, all that kind of furniture and landscape stuff is about the ownership of the land, not so that they're actually owning it, but they're occupying it, and they are furnishing it and looking after it and caring for it. So there's a quite clear message that there are people who live here on a permanent basis, and that they care about that piece of space, they look after it, and so it doesn't get vandalised and it doesn't get left out and become a rubbish tip, because people care about it. So that's a kind of inhabitation of the street that makes a richer environment to be living in. Okay, now there's stuff about the detailing. Not only is that residential up there, and what do you think? How can you tell it's residential?
Maybe the balconies?
Yes, exactly right. The balconies, and then it's got very nice scale with balustrading and so on. And that's an outdoor private space on the public street. So you're getting that connection between public and private. If there are people sitting out there, they're probably below the line of the balustrade. You don't actually see them, so they've got a bit of privacy there. But they can hang out over the balcony if they want to be part of the street, you know, and talk to people or wave, and there's a festival or a parade going past, they can throw rotten tomatoes or whatever it is that they feel like doing, but they can interact with the street, and that's a rich thing. Now, then have a look at the detailing of these buildings, these three actually. They've all got, to more or less extent, that rough stone base. So the plinth, which is the extension of the footing coming up as a widened base to the wall, is detailed with a really hard stone, in which case it's blue stone, and it doesn't come from local, it comes from Sydney or Melbourne. We don't have that material except in Bunbury, and it's not workable. So that's stone that's all imported, and we can only afford to do that because this is Fremantle and it can come in by ship. And in the gold boom period, they've got enough money to spend on imported stone. Then on top of that, they're building in brickwork. But the brickwork is a bit, ordinary in those days, and it's not so hard and precious. They're putting stucco, which is a really soft cement render. And they're doing that deliberately, and then they are making what we call channeled joints or rustication, and that is to make it look strong horizontal lines breaking up the verticals. That gives it a good sense of sitting down on top of that rough stone plinth. That's a Renaissance detailing and architectural stuff. Then you've got your strong horizontal lines and mouldings called string courses and cornices and friezes, some of them with ornamental pressed stuff in them and some with decorations. That's the floor level. So we now know that the main building, and in the ground floor the windows and doors are bigger than the ones up above. That's because these are big public spaces and those are lesser residential spaces. Well, not always residents, sometimes offices, but always the ground floor is the more important. In Renaissance it's called the piano nobile. Piano just means floor, and nobile means the noble rooms, the public rooms, the principal rooms of the space. So this is Renaissance detailing, Renaissance architectural character. And then the upper levels, you've got the columns, often paired or encased pilasters with detailing. Balustrades nearly always the same scale. Now here in this bank building, you've got the balustrade detail, but it's not a balcony. It's just the windows, but they can open that window up and lean over the balustrade balconies in. That's the scale detail. And they've even got it at the ground level. It's a way of detailing and scaling that part of their wall, but it also expresses it as this is a place where inside meets outside. This is a place where you chuck up your window and you lean out or whatever. And that's another Renaissance detail, but it has kind of functional meaning that we can read if we understand how we use buildings. Then you've got the top, which is the cornice line. You call it a frieze or an architrave or whatever stuff. And then you've got here the balcony again. Not the balcony, but the balustrade. This says, this is an edge we don't want you to fall off. If you're up there cleaning the gutter, you can lean over that and talk to the street, but mostly that's about another way of picking up the details you've got elsewhere and reinforcing them at the other level. Okay, so there's all that stuff going on, and then not that bank, but all these, that hotel and this one on the corner have that angled piece of the street. We'll have a look at the corner. It's actually a traditional shop front, and that angled the window, this is a show window, and that's a show window in plate glass, which they can get in those days, and very thin moulding here on the corner, so it's almost like it's all glass. It's a bay window for either side of the door for displaying goods, but the door itself, you can get around the corner easily. There's the shelter under the porch, and if somebody's coming through, it's a glass door, you can see if they're coming. The door swings out, it doesn't hit anybody walking past because it's in the bay. So that's all that sort of generous detailing that we forget about, and we end up with a solid glass wall, and then you walk up to it and it slides away, and then you, oh, there's the door, okay, now I'll go in. That kind of architectural language between the person and the building has disappeared, and it's a generous and it's a complementary thing between buildings and people that people don't really know that how good it is until it's gone. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. But this is now not a shop front, of course, but they're still, in a sense, almost using it for display, but they're using it like a domestic bay window from the inside, a place to hang about or see brochures or actually as part of their thing. But this, and there's a word for that. That type of entrance is called an in-go. So where you go in. In-go, yeah. And that's in your architectural townscape language booklet. Yeah. So I want you to try and think about where they exist and what they actually do. Corner, there's your rounded corner, and that had a tower on the top originally. Peaky tower.
Why isn't it there now?
Well, towers are the first things to go because they get the most damage and they're not easy to maintain. So they blow off in storms, bits fall off, they get too hard to maintain. The easiest thing to do is to take it away.
And no one's using it, right? So
yeah. So it's the last thing to get put back. Now the veranda's got taken away as well, and awnings instead, like here, but these have been put back. Now look at the scale, look at the framing of the footpath that you get out of that veranda post detail. Absolutely wonderful stuff for walking in. We're going to walk down it in a minute, but then right while you're here, think about the vistas. Here's a vista down to Phillimore, and the street is at an angle to us. So that actually makes it a bit curious about what's going on down there. And that's because that street is at an angle to this one, and it's a different kind of street. Down that side, we have the North Pines of the Esplanade and the Ferris wheel and all of that stuff. That's a public park. Was the early bay, and now it's filled in and it's a public park. So we have a different kind of street down there, which is related to the port, and we have what was at the old beach is now the public Esplanade. So these are the different kinds of aspects of these side streets. Okay. This is the building that, it's not a new building in the street for the group who's doing Mowat Street. It is, but it's reuse for Notre Dame is what you need to assess. So you might not be able to get into the building, but just see, it was a hotel. It doesn't have any hotel connection with the street anymore. Is there any public access to the verandas or to the inside or not? So talk about what the consequences are of that building not being in its original hotel use. So it's not, the building hasn't been changed, it's not a new building, but it's a very radical change of use that has consequences for the street. Okay. So, and that's a dominant building for Mowat Street. That's your full Renaissance detailing stuff. And so don't worry too much about the words and the names of those things, but what do they actually do? Look at that rough plinth, that stone. We'll go over and we'll touch it in a minute. And the detailing is so rich, and the grouping of windows into patterns, and the grouping of columns to make up a statement of entry with a little portico over it and that sort of thing. Very strong detailing. I just love it. So those of you who like stonework, this is called a drafted margin and this is called a rock-faced finish, and both of them are done by great skill with a stonemason. They call it quarry face, is another word for it, because it looks like it's been split out of the quarry at that point. Nuh-uh. It was cut out of the quarry as a great big jagged lump, and each stone has been squared and then dressed to make it look like that. So from this face, that's probably the original face, and they cut that back to the square on the block and then drafted these. And you see those lines? That's a claw chisel. It's got teeth, and you hit it with a bolster and it makes those marks. And this is a finer one, comb chisel, and you get a much finer line. So they start with this and then they go to that, and you're getting three different types of surface, all on the one stone, dressed by the stonemason. Very hard work, because you feel that that's really hard stone, and that doesn't get damp affected, just goes black when it's wet. It doesn't have salt attack on it. It's impervious. It's the strongest stone there is, but we don't have any here. It's all come from Melbourne or Sydney. And here is this channel joint. Instead of just a square cutout or a brick course set back, here's a 3-4 part moulding, in and out again. You can see the profile there. Very carefully done, and it's probably made with a metal piece of plain galvanised iron shape, and when the mortar is still soft, they are dragging it along like this, very slowly, and it's set on a timber block which they can drag along like this to make that in that setting. So very much handmade stuff, but looking like machine precision because it's so carefully done. And imagine what this would look like, especially looking down or along the wall, if it was completely smooth. How boring that would be. And not only that, it's in and out all the way, and here is your balustrading under your window. And a deeply moulded sill with a good straight for drip moulding.
That detail.
Stone, but out of cement. There's a chip in the paint. That's it. Trouble. Okay, so just have another look at the verandas down there. 2-story verandas with cast iron lace in the top balconies. Fine filigree detail against the rugged masonry of the walls. Here's a single-story veranda version. Again, we have the truncated corners, round on this one, square on that one, square here, and square there. See what that's working with. Henry Street people, here is your new development, the white thing. The dominant building is your Orient Hotel on the corner here.
What is that?
Orient Hotel.
Oh, that's a hotel.
Yeah. And that is probably the last hotel left this end of Fremantle. There's another one right up the other end, but there used to be one just about every corner. That's a backpackers hostel upstairs and a public bar on the ground. So if you're a keen international traveller, you can barge in there and say hello. If you're a bit timid, then just look from the window. Backpackers hotels are very boisterous. What you call demolition by neglect. They can't get permission to demolish. The council won't let them demolish it, but they want to redevelop it with a new building. They don't want to reuse the old building, so they just shut it down and let it fall down. Now the Heritage Council's got a new act now which actually gives them a little bit more power to force owners of buildings in a public area to look after and maintain their buildings. So that's not working yet, but that might work in the future. So they're still trading at the ground floor level, but the rest of these, and you see the little shops, might huddle up to get out of the rain. These are the little Ingos again, only they're not double ones, they're just single ones with a shop bay, shop front. And there's even a little bit of lead light left in the upper levels. And you see the lead light in the top of those windows on the corner. That's typical of what they do at the upper levels to decorate them and give them a little bit